Okay, this week we're going to talk about potential eruptions that seem to be on the horizon, both physically and in Bible prophecy. There are things that are sort of, in some respects, some people would say that this week was a fairly calm week. And I apologize if my voice sounds a little bit raspy. I was not feeling well last night, so I'll hold out as long as I did. And could you just pray about something right here at the beginning? I'm going to try to do a live Skype, Facebook Messenger interview with Brian Schrager here in about a half hour. So pray that that goes okay. We've never really tried it before, so we're kind of flying without a net, so to speak. And so we'll just pray that that goes well. Just an update. On June 9th, Randy Smith and I are going to do a little conference here at church, focusing mainly on Israel, since this is the 70th anniversary of the rebirth of Israel. I'm probably going to talk a little bit about the mountains of Israel and probably about some of the events that led up to the announcement of the rebirth of Israel in 1948. I have Randy's topics, so we're going to try not to step on each other. He doesn't have my topics because I don't have mine done yet. And so that's up. So this week, and I will also apologize, my presentation is a bit jumbled in that I was very, very busy at work with some TROs this week. I had a TRO I filed Thursday afternoon. Friday, most people were gone, except the judge. It's a federal judge. He's in his 80s. He was literally, when he was in private practice, I had some cases where we were on the same side representing defendants in some civil litigation. And I can tell you that he was the hardest working lawyer I've ever seen. He did not have the concept of a Saturday, a Sunday, or a weekend in his vocabulary. He was appointed to the bench probably about 30 years ago, so he's in his 80s now. And bless his heart, he's a good man. I don't think he still has a concept of holiday weekends or anything such as that, because at 2 o'clock he said, hey, we're gonna convene for a court hearing or a status conference at 2 p.m. And then we talked for 15 minutes, and he said, well, I think you guys should go enter into an order to cover everything over the weekend, and we'll reconvene at 3 o'clock and discuss your order. Well, with lawyers all over the country and clients, we didn't get it to him until about 5:02, but he was still there, and I'm sure his staff was too. So it was a very, very busy week. It's been, again, although people think that it was not a week that a lot happened, it was a week where, if you look at things and pay attention, it was a week where things are sort of simmering under the surface. And they're going to erupt in a number of places. These are some pictures of Kilauea volcano in Hawaii. One of the attorneys I was working with couldn't be available for the conference on Friday because he was on a plane to Hawaii, to the Big Island. And this covers, it's a huge island. This covers a very small part of it. But the pictures are very, to say that they're anything other than apocalyptic, there are neighborhoods that are being destroyed, overrun by lava. They don't know exactly what's going to happen. There have been lava bombs dropping on people. I think one person was injured the other day. And it's, but I think it's a perfect metaphor for what's going on in the world, in that there's these little eruptions all over the place. And we know that these could grow into something very large in a very short matter of time. Now, and I will apologize also, I don't have a lot of scripture today, just because with work and not feeling well last night, I'm glad I just have something to throw up on the screen. Now listen, we have this this thing with the Mueller investigation and the president and the FBI and the DOJ, and to describe it as chaotic would be an understatement. I don't know where it's going. I think one place that you should read is Kimberly Straw. She wrote a column, this was her Friday column in the Wall Street Journal, talking about the real constitutional crisis. She's very bright. She also writes at City Journal. This is a constitutional crisis, in my opinion. I do not want to say, I could not say how strongly I feel about that, in that the president is the one who controls the Department of Justice. There seem to be elements in the Department of Justice that believe that they are above every other law. They are to enforce the law, but they are also subject to the law. And their inability to turn over documents to Congress that have been requested by oversight committees, and Congress is specifically charged with oversight of the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice refusing for months now to turn over things that have been lawfully requested by the Department of Justice is very troubling to me. I think the president did the right thing the other day and ordered them to turn it over. And if the people that are doing this at the DOJ, they can't comply with the order, the directive of the person who's ultimately in charge of the Department of Justice, the president, then they ought to resign and leave and let somebody else go in there who will follow the protocol. The other thing that we're seeing too, this is from this morning's Washington Post, James Clapper, who headed up intelligence and other agencies related to intelligence in the United States during his tenure, he's now 77. And then John Brennan have been out there tweeting and making all sorts of statements that I think are just unprecedented in the history of the Republic about how, and Clapper today is still coming out that Trump won because of Russia. Now, how long is this narrative going to go on? Forever. that's the end. Well, until the Lord returns. It's just a story they're going to tell. But Brennan is completely unhinged. So here's some other things that happened this week that I think are significant from a biblical worldview and a cultural standpoint. In Ireland, they had a vote on Thursday on, I believe it was Amendment 8, which is an amendment they put into the Constitution in Ireland, essentially prohibiting abortions back in 1983. That came up and was subjected to a popular vote. What are we going to do? Are we going to allow abortions or not? Now, as you know, Ireland is heavily Catholic, has a very strong Catholic tradition. Catholic tradition is anti-abortion, pro-life. And so what happened in Ireland, and the vote on Thursday was that 68, at least the polls that I've seen, 68% voted to overturn the amendment and essentially allow abortion on demand. And that's led to a lot of celebrating on the parts of women and others who support abortion. It should be instructive that here in the United States, what do you think would happen if it was, so let's say we overturned Roe versus Wade at the Supreme Court level and it was returned to the states to decide or put up for a public referendum. What do you think the results would be? For example, do you think California, New York, Oregon, Washington, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, Illinois, do you think that they would vote against abortion? No. So look, this is a serious issue for Christians. It's very difficult for me to understand how someone could claim to be Christian and support this abortion. Yet I think it would, the results would be similar in the United States today as to what they were in Ireland. And it was, all the news reports said that it won or the amendment was overturned in a landslide. I do not think that that is an overstatement. It was a big victory for those who support abortion. Look at this. This is from The Independent this morning. Sometimes history seems to be moving in the right direction. Why? Because we're evolving and we're getting better. We're doing better. Somebody just handed me, when you are admitted to a local hospital run by a large local university, I won't identify the university, I'll let you take a big guess as to what it is in Columbus. No cheating, don't look it up. But when somebody, in the intake questionnaire that people fill out when you're being admitted to the hospital there, are questions about gender. Okay, so they're scientists, right? They believe medicine is part of science. So they have female, male, agender, that's no gender or choose not to disclose. Although I think you could maybe do an exam and figure it out. And in most cases you would be able to tell. Other, queer non-binary, transgender female, transgender male. So only 8 choices. So this university obviously is not with the program yet, because even Facebook has, 47 or 57, whatever the number is. This is from the United Kingdom. This lady, I think it's Emily Thornberry is her name. She is a member of the Labour Party. She is considered to be the shadow foreign secretary. So in other words, if Labour won, she would be the foreign secretary. She would take the place of Boris Johnson, who's the current foreign secretary. She got up in Parliament last week, and then Labour's had a lot of trouble with charges of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewishness. Jeremy Corbyn has been caught in a number of clear areas where he is clearly, he claims, well, I'm just against Israel, I'm not anti-Zionist, or I'm anti-Zionist, I'm not anti-Jewish, but then he hangs out with people who are virulently anti-Jewish. But says, well, that's not who I am. So, we had this thing in Gaza. There were, over the protests, there were about 120 Palestinians that were killed in the assault on the border fence, throwing Molotov cocktails, lighting kites on fire, sending them over the border fence, trying to breach, and I think in one case actually breaching the border fence. And their stated purpose, if you interview them, there was a very interesting interview the other day on National Public Radio, and the person was asking this young Gazan Arab, well, what do you want to do? Why do you send kites with swastikas over there? Well, it drives the Jews crazy, he said. So then what do you think the next question was from the NPR guy? Now, I would say, well, why do you want to drive the Jews crazy? His question was, so you do this because it upsets the Israelis. He was constantly changing whatever the person said. He was tamping it down, making it seem like he was just against Israelis, when he kept saying he was against Jews. And so even when somebody it's because the NPR guy is clearly a man who at least leans left, and as a result, he's not able to process information in the way that normal human beings should, because it's all driven by feelings and agenda, and this doesn't fit with the agenda that he has. So there were, a week ago, there were 62 Gazans that were killed. One of those, by the way, I think I have a slide on this, and it's a little bit out of order, was a baby. And when the official list came out, did you see the pictures? The mother holding the baby, the funeral, This baby, 8-month-old, had died because of tear gas, and everybody was upset. And I understand they're upset that their baby died. I get that, okay? But the narrative that was pushed, and this is on the front page of New York Times, Washington Post, papers in Europe. Israel killed a baby by launching tear gas. So this was from the Lebanon Star, which is hardly a pro-Israeli. When the official death toll came out, the baby was not on the list. Why? Because the doctor said it had nothing, it was a congenital condition that this young girl was suffering from. It had nothing to do, they don't know that it had anything to do with the tear gas that she might have inhaled. This is what they do, people. They lie. And the media lies. It's false. It's fake. They are anti-Jew. And it's seeping into the church. More about that in a few minutes. But here is a member of parliament getting up to talk about what happened in Gaza.
Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to you for granting this urgent question. Yesterday's horrific massacre at the Gaza border left at least 58 dead and almost 3,000 injured. And our first thoughts today are with those Palestinians mourning their loved ones or waking up with life-changing injuries. And what makes yesterday's events all the worst is that they didn't come as a result of some accidental overreaction to one day's protests, but as the result of a culmination of 6 weeks, an apparently calculated and deliberate policy to kill and maim unarmed protesters who pose no threat to the forces on the Gaza border. Many of them shot in the back, many of them shot hundreds of meters from the border, and many of them children. And if we are in any doubt, Mr. Speaker, about the lethal intent of the Israeli snipers working on the border, I'm afraid we only need to look at the wounds suffered by their victims. On hunting websites, Mr. Speaker, in America, they regularly debate the merits of 7.6mm bullets versus the 5.5mm bullets. The latter, they say, is effective when you want to wound multiple internal organs, while the former is preferred by some because, and I quote, it is designed to mushroom and fragment, to do maximum internal damage to the animal. And it was this ammunition, it is alleged, that was used in Gaza yesterday against men, women, and children. On the very first day of the violence, Mr. Speaker, the UN Secretary-General called for an independent investigation into those incidents, and last night the Kuwaiti government asked the UN Security Council to agree a statement doing the same, only to be vetoed by the United States. And while I agree with every word of that Kuwaiti statement, it is easy to see why the US vetoed it, because it was critical of their Jerusalem embassy move. So can I ask the Minister of State today if he will take the initiative, not just in supporting a new Security Council statement, but in helping draft a new statement, making no criticism of any party and no link to any other issue, but simply calling for an urgent, independent investigation into the violence in Gaza to assess whether international law has been broken and to hold those responsible to account. A statement that no country could reasonably object to, not even the United States, unless they are prepared to make the case that there is one rule for the government of Israel and another one for everyone else. And I believe that the investigation must just be the start of an effort at the UN and elsewhere to bring urgent and concerted international pressure on the Netanyahu government to lift the illegal blockade on Gaza and comply with all the UN resolutions ordering them to remove their illegal settlements and end their illegal occupation of Palestinian territories. If yesterday's death can act as a catalyst for that action, then at least they will not have been in vain. And in the interim, especially as the protests resume today, will the Minister of State join me in urging the Israeli forces serving on the Gaza border to show some long overdue responsibility to their fellow human beings and stop this vicious slaughter?
Well, that was Jeremy Corbyn sitting behind her on the left of the screen. it's always important to put this in context. Of the 58 that she mentioned, maybe they should just go ask the Hamas leadership in Gaza, what were these people up to? Of the 64 killed in the most recent, a week ago Friday, violence, there was a little smaller violence this weekend, or Friday. Of the 64 killed that day, the Hamas leadership claimed that 50 of them were Hamas members. In other words, terrorists. So here's the rule, Emily Thornsberry, that maybe you need to understand that countries can do, is that when terrorists are assaulting your border with the stated goal of getting across the border and killing your people, cutting their hearts out and eating it, they said this, my friends, then you are allowed to protect your border. Let's start with that rule. And again, she proves, being a person of the left, that certain statements that can be made, Germany and the left are almost always wrong about everything. This is a picture of number 10, the gates outside number 10 Downing Street this morning in London. And you see a sign there in the back, Free Tommy. Now, what happened the other day was Tommy Robinson. Now listen, I'm not here to defend everything that Tommy Robinson has done in his life or stood for or said, okay? I want that to be clear. Don't say that I do. He uses pretty foul language at times. But he has been very bold for some time now in speaking up about the problems with the Islamic, what Melanie Phillips wrote about in 2006 in her book, Londonistan, and the changes that have happened in London and the United Kingdom with massive Muslim immigration, and the way that it is changing and transforming neighborhoods. And so what Tommy Robinson did the other day was he went to the court in Leeds. In Leeds, there are a number of men who are under trial. There have been a number of convictions of what I could only term as Muslim rape gangs, where these men get young girls, 10, 11 years old, lure them into a trust relationship, and then rape them and pass them around to be sexually abused, and even, in some cases, sell them into sexual slavery. In England, in Great Britain. And so this person, there's a couple guys who are on trial. So Tommy Robinson went down there. Now the judge in that case has issued a gag order. You can't talk about this. And you can look up the video of the arrest. He was walking around saying, they're on trial, they're alleged to have done this. He mentions no names or anything like this. And in the midst of it, the police show up. He's taken off to jail, put in the paddy wagon, taken off. And my understanding is, I haven't been able to confirm all of it, is because he had a pending contempt of court suspended sentence, he's now been sentenced to 13 months in jail. My fear is he will be killed in jail. And I don't think the authorities care. They put a gag order on. The judges put a gag order on in the press in England talking about what happened to Tommy Robinson. Don't tell me that free speech is not at risk. Don't tell me that the left in this country would want to do the exact same thing. This is a battle. The Gatestone Institute, which I respect greatly, former chairman was John Bolton. Swift Injustice, the case of Tommy Robinson, Brent Bauer wrote this morning, published at 5 a.m. The swiftness which with injustice was meted out to Tommy Robinson is stunning. No more than that, it is terrifying. With having access to his own lawyers, Robinson was summarily tried and sentenced to 13 months behind bars. He was then transported to Hull Prison. Meanwhile, the judge who sentenced Robinson also ordered British media not to report on the case. Newspapers that had already posted reports of his arrest quickly took them down. All of this happened on the same day. In Britain, rapists enjoy the right to a full and fair trial, the right to legal representation of their choice, the right to have sufficient time to prepare their cases, and the right to go home on bail between sessions of their trial. In fact, in the video, Tommy confronted a couple of the defendants who were coming into the court there, I believe in Leeds, because they're out on bail. No such rights were offered, however, to Tommy Robinson. I think Bruce is correct in what he says. Garrett Wilders on the right has another post. This just went up this morning as well. Parliamentary questions on the arrest of Tommy Robinson. You can look that up at the Gatestone Institute. And Brent also had an article that he put up yesterday, about in the appeasement Olympics, and the European appeasement Olympics, who wins. And he made the case at the time that, well, Macron in France is sort of ignoring the no-go zones that exist in France, and there are other countries that have major problems, and they're appeasing everything, trying to think this is the way to get by. And so in the appeasement Olympics, so this morning, very quickly, in one day, he corrected it, and he said, down here, you see at the bottom, it says, all right, the competition is over, Britain wins. He says this, however, Tommy Robinson may have strayed from the straight and narrow over the years. He's a champion of those victimized children, a voice for freedom, and a living rebuke to the cowardices of the British media, police, social workers, and other officials and public figures who knew what was going on in flats in Rotherham, Newcastle, and elsewhere, but stayed silent. It is a massive scandal in that country. So, appeasement Olympics won. Now, this came out of Sweden. This is kind of an interesting publication. Sweden and Norway are concerned about Russian activity in the waters off of their countries. So Sweden issued this. It went to about 5 million homes in Sweden. If crisis or war comes, and you can see they're afraid about war coming. Be on the lookout for false information. Yeah. In the event of a terror attack, it tells you what to do. Sweden's defenses, total defense. The term total defense denotes all activities that are needed in order to prepare Sweden for war. If Sweden is attacked, resistance is required, heightened state of alert. And then it has a checklist, which is actually pretty good if you want to make some preparations about home preparedness tips. And it's free, it's on the internet. You don't have to pay anybody for it. So you might want to take a look at that. But look, this is Sweden. They're concerned about war. All over the world, it's like a volcano with the lava underneath the surface ready to erupt. That's what people think. Sweden, listen, I doubt that you will have anybody talking about Bible prophecy and related current events in Sweden today, in the churches, anywhere. I mean, we all think of Sweden as, especially in the progressive part of American politics, Sweden is sort of is nirvana, it's heaven. Because 60% of the people who work for the government. It's great, it's fantastic. But there is war. Of course, this is the one. President Trump sent a letter to Kim Jong-un. The Boston Herald called it a Dear Jong letter. You might as well have a little bit of laughter in your life, right? So Trump, this has just happened, I don't know, Thursday or Friday. Trump calls off the summit. And then the next morning, Trump says, on the way to Marine One helicopter flight, well, we're still talking. Might still be on. So it's just a little bit chaotic. I think everybody would agree with that. In Iraq, al-Sadr, this is a Shiite cleric who really effectively controls who the next prime minister of Iraq is going to be. And he came out, by the way, this week and sounded very conciliatory, not going to pay attention to Iran that much. We're going to worry about Iraq. We don't want foreign people here messing up our country. Now, he's made some pretty fiery statements in the past about those who oppose his particular version of Islam. So we'll see how this goes. I conversed with someone about this week, and I just said this. there are all these different views of where the Antichrist comes from: America, Europe, the Islamic world, Iraq, rebuilt Babylon, all this. And I'm sort of like, everybody right now has a candidate they can make a good case for. And that's in a way, I think that's a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Because Jesus, when he was talking about the end times, even in that day, he was saying, many antichrists will come, right? And what do we see now? Yeah, there are many antichrists on the scene. That's why I personally think the identification of the Antichrist will be when he goes into the temple and declares himself above all that is called God. Because there might be all sorts of different covenants, peace agreements, however you think that plays out. The scripture says confirms a covenant, makes strong a covenant. Doesn't necessarily say peace agreement. People interpret it as a peace agreement, and look, we'll see how it plays out. But there might be many agreements to reach peace in the Middle East, particularly with Israel, or a covenant with Israel, to get them their temple back and that sort of thing. We'll see how that goes. Abbas appears to be at his end. Down here in the lower corner, left-hand corner, Putin says, or this is Pompeo, withdraw forces from Syria and support for Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran says, and Hezbollah says, that's none of your business, we'll do whatever we want. Great article again at Gatestone Institute from this morning, Imagining War, Serving False Peace. Listen to this. The nuclear deal, or JCPOA, lacks a universally recognized version. This is maybe news to a lot of people, but this is actually true. Coming in 3 different versions, 2 in Persian and 1 in English, with significant differences between them. Next, it was negotiated between Iran and the so-called P5+1, a group with no legal status, no mission statement, and no accountability to anyone. Thirdly, it was not signed by anyone, and no cabinet and no legislature ever debated, let alone legally approved it. It's not a treaty. It's a sort of agreement. Now, I'm a lawyer. In order to have an agreement, a contract, you have to have a meeting of the minds. So if I say I will buy XYZ for $5,000 and you come back and say I'll buy XY for $5,001, there's not a contract yet because there has not been a meeting of the minds. You have to come back and say I'll buy XYZ, or make a counteroffer, and then the other person could accept. So there's no agreement. There's no contract. Obama, I don't like to say this, Obama lied. Ben Rhodes lied. Susan Rice, Samantha Power lied. John Kerry lied. That, I like saying that one. But that is all true. This was a fake agreement. It didn't mean anything. And it's time that people woke up and discovered what the truth is about this thing. Now, in St. Petersburg, Russia, as we're talking, there is a St. Petersburg International Economic Forum going on. And here is Vladimir Putin representing, or greeting Emmanuel Macron and the Macron's former teacher, whatever you want to call her, and they're at one of the palaces there in St. Petersburg, and it's a big important meeting that's taking place. At the Economic Forum, Macron, they did panels, very similar to what happens at Davos. They have so many conferences. And they're all live streamed and put on YouTube now, and it's just incredible. And Macron was there at a Jerusalem embassy move. That was a mistake. It was a bad thing to do. And then they asked Putin a question about, hey, your term's going to be up in 2024. Are you leaving? Here's his answer.
Will you tell us here today that you will indeed step down at the end of your next term? Thank you.
Начнем с последнего.
Let's start with your last question. I stick to the Constitution of the Russian Federation, and in the Constitution it is written that you can have no more than 2 consecutive terms, so no more than 2 terms, and this is my second term. As you remember, I was president twice before that, and then I left the position because the Constitution didn't provide for me to be re-elected, and I want to stick to this regulation as well. I guess I answered your first question.
So now a lot of people said, well, he's leaving. He'll be done in 2024. How many, can I see a show of hands? I'll just take an informal survey here at Fellowship Bible Chapel in Lewis Center, Ohio. How many of you think Putin would step down in 2024? Nobody. Look, he's going to follow I call it the Putin Erdogan lifetime service methodology. So what did they do? So Erdogan, he gets elected prime minister of Turkey. He reaches term limits. So what did they do? They changed the constitution so that he would now be able to serve the prime minister duties. Essentially became the presidential duties. And then when he got to the end of the presidential term, they changed the constitution again to allow the president to continue in office for like 15 years. You know, Putin, or Erdogan, I'm 2 days older than Erdogan. So 15 years from now, we'll be older. He'll still be 2 days younger than me. Putin did the same thing. He started out as, I think, president, then went to prime minister, now he's president. So look, he's 6 years to go. He has plenty of time to change the Constitution and the rules, right? So I wouldn't be too excited about him saying that he's going to leave. That's what I'm going to say. So there's a lot of stuff going on in Syria. Syria supposedly has completely eradicated people from Yarmouk, the Palestinian refugee camp within the confines of the city of Damascus, on the south side of the city of Damascus. Used to be occupied by hundreds of thousands of people. One report I read today said there's nobody there anymore. The Palestinian, I want you to understand, I want you to hear this, the Palestinian refugee camp inside of Syria, nobody lives there anymore. 7 years ago, there were hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who lived there, people who call themselves Palestinians. They are all gone. Thousands are dead. The other part of the report that I read was that there is not a single residence left that is habitable within Yarmouk. Not one. The Syrian army and its supporters have gone in and they've taken all the furniture, and that's how they're making some extra money on the side to support themselves in the war effort. Have you heard one moronic leftist like Emily Thornberry get up in Parliament and talk about how awful it is that this Palestinian refugee camp within the confines of Syria that has been there for 70 years, 70 years, my friends. Have you heard one? Have you heard Jeremy Corbyn, Emily Thornberry, John Kerry, Barack Obama, Susan Rice, Samantha? Have you heard one of these people complain about what has happened to the Palestinians in Syria? But 62 are killed assaulting the border fence in Israel, and the world stops. This is prophetic. Listen, the world's going to gather against Jerusalem. Can you see the beginnings of this? They don't care about what's going on anywhere else. Millions have been killed in Africa in various disputes. It happens in Asia, in the former Burma. But a Palestinian trips and falls in Jerusalem in It's front page news all over the world. A little Palestinian baby dies. It's tragic. Pray for her parents. Losing a child is horrific. But they try to blame it on Israel, and that's not true. There was a proposal in Congress, I hear, that it's since been tabled to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Temple Mount, or over Golan. Ambassador David Friedman was in Jerusalem this week, and somebody was able to hold up a picture that he was taking, and it's caused quite a firestorm because you can see in the picture that this is the Temple Mount here in the bottom, and you see that instead of the Dome of the Rock, there's a Jewish temple there. And so this has caused quite the diplomatic fray. Good article in Jerusalem Post this morning. It's past time to bury the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. And NATO ships docking in Haifa ahead of joint exercises. This is that article about that little girl who supposedly died. Putin, again, playing both Iran and Israel. I'm trying to get to my time with Brian here quickly so we don't stay here too long. By 2025, this came from an Israeli IDF chief, an ex-IDF chief, saying by 2025, a constant satellite feed coming from 10,000 satellites around the world will aid targeted killings. I personally find that very troubling. But listen, you know, we often wonder about this beast system, you know, and how it will work. It could be very bad. Somebody, I don't even have a slide up for this. Somebody just sent me an email this morning. I did check. It was in the Wall Street Journal on Friday. You can look it up. In Brazil, so I went to a fast food place the other day, about a week and a half ago. I was hungry. I wanted something quick. I had a 2-for-1 burger special. So I thought, well, I'll get one. I'll throw the other one in the fridge. Okay? So I get to the place near downtown Columbus, and I ordered 2. We're out of that meat for that burger. There are like 40 Krogers within 5 miles of here. Go over to the store and buy some. Because now I'm disappointed. Now I'm really hungry. You know, now I really want a burger. And I've noticed this happening more and more. I don't know if you've noticed this, is you go places to get something and they're out of it. Because we're all running on this just-in-time inventory where things are delivered at the last minute. And as a result, any blip in the supply chain causes a lot of problems. This is going on in Brazil right now. They have, in the United States is different. In Brazil, in the United States, we have a very unique geography in that our agriculture industrial heartland, to the extent that we still have an industrial heartland, is next to navigable waters, rivers and lakes that are tied together with canal systems, so that, because water transportation is the easiest way, and as long as the water's there, you have a way to get things to market. Brazil doesn't have, they have the Amazon River, this huge river in the north, but that's down south where everybody lives, Sao Paulo, what is 25, 30 million people in this one city. So, and they use just-in-time as well. And so they're having problems in Argentina and Brazil with supply chains right now. Delivering feed to chickens. The word out of Brazil today, I think this was in the Wall Street Journal article, that because of lack of supplies, 20 million chickens and 1 million pigs could die in the next week because they don't have feed to feed them. And this is because they're having a trucking strike in Brazil. So one little blip in the system, well, what happens if you don't have chicken? Well, then you don't have people eating. And you see how it can cascade very quickly. So I don't have time to go into this. There's this book by Rise and Kill First by Ronan Bergman. He's done some good investigative work in books with the Mossad. He did a piece, and go in a very targeted fashion and look for this piece. It was by Richard Engel on the Rachel Maddow show the other night on MSNBC about how Israel went into Iran and the Mossad got all of these nuclear documents out. It's pretty well done, aside from the little missives that are directed at Israel and that type of thing. It's a pretty well done piece. It was on Friday night. It's about 15, 20 minutes long. And then don't watch anything else there. And if you're prone to fits of outbursts of anger and that type of thing, or triggering events, the whole thing will be a triggering events. In Israel, they had Prime Minister Netanyahu gave a very nice little speech at the opening of the Paraguay inventory. So let me, we'll have to do this. This is a great article by Jonathan Spire in Foreign Policy. He's Jewish, he's from England, he lives in Israel, but he's gone and he's done a lot of great work about these wars. And it's a very good article about Putin's endgame and Syria has arrived. Let me just read 2 paragraphs. Some have speculated that, so Putin says here, Syria increasingly seems to be moving toward a de facto partition accompanied by ongoing low-level military conflict and a functional but sluggish politics, a so-called frozen conflict. This may have been the goal all along for President Vladimir Putin, who has initiated and managed such conflicts elsewhere, including in Georgia and Ukraine. Other significant players in Syria, including Israel, the United States, Turkey, and the remaining Sunni Arab rebels, may likewise discover they'd be satisfied with this new reality. The clearest losers, by contrast, would be the Assad regime in Iran. You should look up this article. I'll talk more about it next week, since we got a little bit of a late start and we're running short of time. It's very interesting. We've been talking about this alliance between Syria and Iran and Turkey and how this all seems to be coming together, setting up Ezekiel 38. And then all of a sudden, Putin comes out and says, well, all foreign fighters need to leave here. Now, they've clarified that to mean, well, all foreign fighters that weren't invited by the Syrian government should leave. And what Putin is doing is he wants to get the contracts to rebuild Syria, because if you've seen the pictures, it's very apocalyptic. You can see the picture here. This is Yarmouk. And so when somebody says all the homes in Yarmouk are destroyed, pretty plausible. A lot of Syria, eastern Ghouta, and all these places, they've been reduced to rubble. But Russia, Netanyahu went to Russia, and now Putin is sort of saying, okay, as long as you don't kill my guys, you can kind of bomb. I think this is what he's saying. You can go bomb the Iranian installations there to protect yourselves if you think that's necessary. But this is a great article. And this Middle East conflict, 4,000 Palestinians killed in Syria's brutal war. Has this been in the mainstream media? Have they reported this? But you would be able to tell me how many Palestinians were killed over the last 5 weeks. Why? Because it's covered everywhere. And this is a good article from a blog called Section 117, Conflict in the Middle East Since 1945. Look at this. Meanwhile, the Arab states are not proficient at military victory and conventional warfare, but they have rarely failed to beat insurgents and terrorists, perhaps partly because they are not as constrained by brutal means or media considerations like Israel or Western democracies are. There is no way Israelis or Americans would have been permitted to carpet bomb a city like the Russians did in Grozny, to use gas like the Egyptians did in Yemen, or the Iraqis against the Kurds, to massacre 30,000 civilians indiscriminately like the Syrians did in Hama in 1982. That was the father of the current dictator in charge of Syria. Or to shell Palestinian refugee camps mercilessly as the Jordanians and Syrians did in the 1970s. Why? Because they were having terrorists there. Black September, that's a Jordanian attack on a Palestinian camp. That led to that movement. That's what attacked the Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics. Not the Jordanian athletes, the Israeli athletes, the Jewish athletes at the Munich Olympics in 1972. So I'm going to connect to Brian in just a moment. This week is Christ at the Checkpoint. It'll be live stream. You can probably find it. christatthecheckpoint.bethbc.edu. Listen, folks. I am seeing a lot of anti-Jewish narratives, some big, some small, in the Christian press, in the prophecy-related community. And it usually goes like this. The New World Order is bad. The Zionists established the New World Order. The New World Order is pro-Israel, pro-Zionist. Bibi Netanyahu is the biggest Zionist and pro-New World Order man on the planet, and he wants to start World War III because he's a tool of the Zionist people. Now, look, I think there are evil people. They want to do these things. As I've said before, sometimes I just don't think they're very good at it. If they've been at this for hundreds of years. And when it's time for all this thing to wrap up, God will let it happen. We don't force it. I saw videos this week. Christians want to force World War III or Armageddon. Really? Do you really think that? We know that it's coming because we believe what the Bible says. But we're not forcing it. Now, the Iranians, the 12th of Mahdi group, the Shiites, they want to force it because they believe they can. I don't know a single Christian who believes that they can. So let's try to get Brian. And listen, True News, you can look it up on Thursday's show. Rick Wiles was talking about, and he's come out, he's very anti-Israel. Very anti-premillennialism, rapture, any of this. He's been extremely vocal in his opposition to this. I will admit, on times when he talks about like Bethel Church and Reading, he's actually done some very good analysis of the false teaching there. But he came out the other day, he says, we've been invited, they're at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum this weekend. He says, we've been invited to Christ at the Checkpoint and we're going to go. Because these are great Christians at Christ at the Checkpoint. And it's taking place in Bethlehem, Palestine. Well, there's not a Bethlehem, Palestine. There's a Bethlehem, but there's no Palestine. So let me see if this works. Here we go. Give me just a moment here. We'll try. Oh, Brian. Are you there, Brian?
Yeah, I'm in the car. Sorry.
Oh. Are you not you're not doing Uber on the side there, are you? Just kidding.
No, I can pull over here just a second.
Okay, so look, I think this is working, and everyone can hear.
Okay, great. Hi.
Hi. This is Brian Schrager, Jerusalem Journal, the Heim Report. First of all, Brian, I got your report this morning. Tell me just a little bit about what's going on with you and Facebook, and you're trying to promote the Heim Report by paying money to Facebook, and what's happening.
Well, Facebook is messing with us. They've reduced the number of people who are able to see the Heim Report. And so then I started paying 30 shekels a day, which is like, I don't know, $8 a day, to promote it. And that was helping. And now they've stopped allowing that to happen. I tried to, it's called Boost when you share a post. So I tried to boost it on Sunday, and I was told it had political content. And then today it said I couldn't post because it had a call to action. So I thought, well, maybe that's the little like thumb thing I had on there. So I erased it. That didn't help. And then I often say, see the Facebook description for all the headlines. So I took off the word see. That didn't help. So I don't know what it is. They don't tell you.
Yeah, they're very obtuse in the way they enforce their standards. So look, folks, when you see the Heim Report, you can share it in Facebook and Twitter and other places. Help Brian out. because it is a great, I personally rely on it quite a bit, a great collection of headlines and stories. And with Brian's sometimes commentary there at the beginning is pretty good too as to what's going on. So in just outside of Jerusalem in Bethlehem this week, I just mentioned the Christ at the Checkpoint conference, and I mentioned a Christian news outlet that talked about that they had been invited to Christ at the Checkpoint. I think I sent you a link about that, Brian. And the guy was very excited. We're going to Bethlehem, Palestine. You live there. Is there a Bethlehem, Palestine?
I think someone wants me to move my car. Hang on. The place I pulled over isn't working for somebody. Okay. Well,
Brian, use the horn. I've driven in Israel. Use the horn. It works. You told me that.
Well, actually, where I am right now, I'm in the Judean hills, and I'm on my way to a restaurant with my friend Dexter Van Zyl, who's here from Camera. I'm sure you've read his stuff.
Camera is a very, very excellent media research site, looking at what the patent anti-Israel bias that's in the press.
Yes, and Dexter has always taken on the Christian Palestinianism, and so he's been to all the Christ at the Checkpoint conferences and written about them, and he's been to a number of other things as well. In any case, he's here. We're about to go out to a restaurant to eat, but yeah, we're in the Judean hills, and they like to call it Palestine here. They certainly have the flag out, but they've never been officially recognized as such.
So tell me a little bit. Now you've been to Christ at the Checkpoint as and Dexter can chime in if he wants, but tell us a little bit about what you think is going to happen at this year's Christ at the Checkpoint conference and your concerns and that sort of thing.
Well, my concerns are the same as it has been throughout. Basically, what they do is they take the Palestinian anti-Israel narrative and they Christianize it. They do that very well. They put it in the language of Western evangelicals. So people who show up that want to have a balanced or look at the other side of the issue, for example, they are easily sucked into this because it sounds so familiar. It sounds so much like their language. It is their language. But it's using the language of Western evangelicalism to sell a very, very virulent anti-Israel narrative that's not only anti-Israel, but its underlying theology is a combination of what's called replacement theology and liberation theology. Replacement theology is the idea that the church replaced Israel and now is the sole heir of all the promises of God, including the land which has been expanded to the whole earth. That's replacement theology. And it goes all the way back to the very earliest times of the church. I think we see it in Romans chapter 11. So that's before Rome. That's before the temple fell in 70 A.D. So this idea of replacement is very, very old. It infected the Christianity early on. The other thing is called liberation theology, and Christ at the Checkpoint is a combination of replacement theology and liberation theology. Liberation theology is the idea, in essence, that the gospel is of Jesus. Its essence is to set us free from social, economic, political injustices. And so we've been redeemed to bring about justice and to know justice in the world. This is something that was developed by radical, as I understand it, priests and monks in Latin America in the 1980s. And my understanding is that the Roman Catholic Church has largely forsaken this, but it's been taken up mainly by so-called Christian Palestinians. So it's also often called the theology of justice.
Right, liberation theology.
Yeah, well, liberation theology, right.
Although I think you'll find that the current Pope is fully on board with it. I'm thinking of the Pope when he was there in Israel a few years back and went down to that Mass that they held there at the Church of the Nativity in Major Square there in Bethlehem. And he had...
Yeah, I was here. I was here for that. In fact, if you go online, you can find an article I wrote called It was in the Jerusalem Post, identity theft, and it was about. I know that was like those are the two key words, and it was about the Pope coming to Bethlehem and how that there was no evidence of the Jewishness of Bethlehem, let alone Jesus, in anything that was done. In fact, they robbed the essence of the gospel when he came by mingling it with this Palestinian liberation narrative. And yes, the Pope sanctified it, in my opinion, by not saying a word about it. He didn't say.
Yeah, so Christ at the Checkpoint starts tomorrow. What are your concerns about what might happen this year and some of the things on the agenda? Tell us about that.
Well, unlike in 2016, I could see what was coming. In 2016, I knew that they were going to come after Christians who support Israel, and they did that very pointedly and very clearly. This year, I'm not seeing exactly where they're going, and I'm concerned about that. I think one thing they're doing is they're doing a dry run for the first Christ at the Checkpoint conference that they're going to do in the States this coming October. So I suspect there's something of that going on. But looking at the agenda and what people are going to say that are speaking, I just don't know.
Yeah, I saw a video of Michael Brown who's there, and I have a lot of issues, I know you do as well, with some of the things that Michael Brown has defended, but he's sort of there to present the pro-Israel viewpoint. What happened? Tell us what happened to him in Jerusalem the other day.
Well, he posted a blog post about what happened to him, and it was just a couple days ago, so you can look it up, and I don't remember the circumstances about how he got going on this argument with Orthodox Jews. I think it was in the Shuk in Jerusalem. But somebody maybe recognized him, I don't know, and they said that he was, missionizing. He was there to convert Jews. And they began to yell and in Hebrew, and Michael doesn't speak modern Hebrew. He knows biblical Hebrew. But he took them on. Interestingly enough, Michael had a film crew with him. He had staff, and so you can see what the pictures that he took and a video that he put up online about this.
And he actually he ended up down at the jail for a few hours, didn't he?
Yeah, police came and picked him up, and according to his narrative, they just wanted to know, are you a missionary? And that's a really negative word here among the Jews. And according to what he wrote, he said, yes, I guess I am. And apparently some police officers, oh, good. Which is like, you wouldn't expect that answer.
Yeah.
The big problem, John, is that what he's done is he's actually fed the Christ at the Checkpoint narrative with this encounter. Mm-hmm. Because Christ at the Checkpoint's narrative is that the Jews don't deserve to have a state. They don't, because they rejected Jesus, and that Christians who support the state of Israel are heretics because they're putting Israel, modern state of Israel, before Jesus. And now they have a video of this guy coming in who's going to represent the pro-Israel position, but they've got a video now of Orthodox Jews spitting when he talks to them about Jesus. Mm-hmm. Hi.
Yeah. Well, and he's supposed to be involved, I think, in a panel with
Munther Isaac.
Munther Isaac, and also speak on sort of the Christian Zionist perspective at the conference.
Yeah, he's doing two things. He's doing a regular formal presentation in the main event, and then there will be, I forget if it's Tuesday or Wednesday, there are breakout conferences in the afternoon, and he's going to be teamed up with Munther Isaac, who has a PhD from Oxford, I believe, either Oxford or Cambridge, but I think it's Oxford, and he's a Lutheran minister here, and he's also I don't know his exact office at Bethlehem Bible College, but he might be the academic dean now. In any case, they will be presenting both sides. I mean, Munther will present what we would call, and is properly called, liberation theology, and Michael will be presenting a literal biblical interpretation. Now, the one reason to be cautiously optimistic about Michael, in my opinion, is that he is a debater. He's a skilled debater. So, unlike past people that they have brought in to represent the pro-Israel point of view, these other people have largely been pastors. Michael is on, he goes out and he debates all the time. So he might do a good job. By all means, pray about this.
Sure.
Pray for him.
Well,
Pray for Dexter and me.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we'll pray for you and Dexter and your safety and everything this week, and that you'll be able to, either one or both of you will be able to post us some regular updates about what's going on there, and that you'll be able to attend the entire conference, which I think in the past it's been live streamed, so I told people to check. So, look, I don't want to keep you from dinner. We'll look forward to your updates. And,
thanks. By the way, they have put a notice up on their Facebook page that the main sessions are going to be live streamed. So I think the parts that won't be live streamed are the breakout sessions.
Okay.
But it looks like the ones that are presented to everybody, those will be live streamed. So yeah, I think it starts at like 9 in the morning. Now here tomorrow afternoon it starts at 3 in the afternoon my time, which is like 8 in the morning your time. But then on Tuesday it starts, I think, at 9 in the morning, which is like 2 in the morning your time.
Okay. Well, look, enjoy your dinner, and don't save any hummus for me.
Okay.
Okay. God
All
bless.
right.
Thanks. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, appreciate it. Bye for now.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Dexter. Okay. Well, that worked. Praise the Lord. Okay, so look, pray for these guys. Brian got dragged into a little encounter with some time in, we've heard of Facebook jail. This was Palestinian jail because they just didn't like what he said at one of these conferences that he wrote about. And so pray for their safety. Pray that the message will get out. Pray for, as I said, I don't want to say that I support Michael Brown. I hope that he does well in this endeavor, because I think it's pretty important. So let's pray and pay attention to what's going on. Father, thanks for your word. Thanks for the truth of the real gospel of Jesus Christ, not this fake social gospel liberation theology, but the gospel that says that we are saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ and his finished work on the cross, his death, burial, and resurrection, and that he is coming again for us. Pray that you'll be with Brian and Dexter this week. Pray you'll be with all of us this week. Give us opportunities to share our faith. In Jesus' name, amen.